Well, never mind how you've hurt me. I still want you to have your movie. It's called Phantom Planet. You're welcome.
This time we watch Season 9, Episode 2, The Phantom Planet.
The one about a rogue planet and a guy from the moon and how they might crash into each other. It's Crash of Moons. No, it's not, is it?
No, it's not that, but it is a part of our Summer of Space. Space.
That's right. This summer we've been watching some Radar Men from the Moon, some Being from Another Planet, and now The Phantom Planet. It's Space City over here.
If there was a city called Space, we would be living in it.
I want to do a little bit of follow-up before we get to talking about today's episode, Phantom Planet, because I realized as I was finishing up editing and putting the final touches on our previous episode on Being from Another Planet, that I left some low-hanging fruit on the vine, so to speak, about some of the things we were talking about in our Familiar Faces section.
What low-hanging fruit could we possibly have missed, Chris? We're all about the low-hanging fruit.
I really feel like if I'd known that Flesh Gordon had a lot of stop animation in it, I would have mentioned that just to make it even more exciting for you.
Yes, because you know how much I love Harryhausen. I always want to talk about the skeletons when we talk about Hercules or Sinbad or anything. And, yes, I also had not actually seen the movie Flesh Gordon, so I also could not speak to the Harryhausen-esque special effects.
They are Harryhausen-esque, but not, of course, done by Harryhausen himself. The other follow-up that I feel like I should have mentioned was we mentioned Bonanza: Under Attack, the 90s era sequel he made for TV movie of Bonanza, the beloved TV series. And I mentioned the unlikely fact that Leonard Nimoy has a role in that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't realize until I watched the trailer for putting it in the show notes was that Leonard Nimoy plays Frank James, which is to say Jesse James' brother Frank.
What?
Real person Frank James. Frank and Jesse James, notorious Old West criminal types. Leonard Nimoy is playing Frank James in that.
I mean, it makes sense because Leonard Nimoy is a real guy, and so is Frank James.
Yeah, that's how that works.
That's totally how that works.
Anyway, I should have caught that because that's pretty cool. And I'm sorry I didn't. I was feeling under the weather. Guess what? I'm still feeling a bit under the weather. So who knows what I won't say this time.
Oh, Chris, don't you ever get well?
No, not in the last year or so. I don't.
Well, we're just going to have to chug our way through another episode and fight off the illnesses. It's going to be great.
Chug-a-lug. This time we watched Season 9, Episode 2, The Phantom Planet. It is the far future year of 1980. Humans, good old-fashioned American humans, have established a base on the moon, which will make it much easier for them to explore space. It's kind of like how parking your car in the driveway instead of the garage saves you so much time on your commute to work. But I digress. A spacecraft has gone missing, and perhaps some sort of rogue planetoid is to blame. Captain Frank Chapman and his philosophizing first mate are sent to investigate. But before long, whoops, the ship is in trouble. The first mate dies, saving Captain Frank's life, and the captain wakes up surrounded by little people. Like really little people, only a few inches tall. Once these little people open up Captain Frank's helmet, our hero starts shrinking down, because apparently breathing the local oxygen will cause you to become only a few inches tall. Anyway, the now tiny Captain Frank gets in a fight with one of the other little guys, or I guess they're now his size, so it's normal. Anyway, he's quickly overwhelmed, and they take him to court. He's tried and found guilty, and he is condemned to live a free man within the Little People's Society, which is called Rayton. Anyway, the people of Rayton, including their leader, Sesame, don't want the rest of the Earthlings to know about their world, so Captain Frank can't leave. But that's okay. He'll enjoy life on Rayton, and he gets to choose between two beautiful women. Sesam's spoiled daughter Liara and a woman who can't speak named Zatha. But there's also this guy named Heron who loves Liara, and Heron is jealous because Liara's liking Captain Frank more, and so he does the normal thing of threatening Captain Frank to a deadly honor battle. Captain Frank wins, but he decides to spare Heron's life. The two become friends, and Heron agrees to help Captain Frank escape Rayton. The plot of this movie continues to be kinda everywhere when it turns out the Raytons have a mortal enemy, the Solarites, and from a previous Solarite attack, they've got one of them captured. He is the cutest thing, a kind of bipedal sad dog. Anyway, another Solarite attack happens, and then the captured Solarite gets free, and he starts attacking, and Captain Frank helps in the battle, and he saves the day, something, something, blah, blah, blah. Turns out, Zatha was unable to talk because she was traumatized by a Solarite, but now that she's seen Captain Frank take one down, she can talk again. And Captain Frank and Zeta have fallen in love. But Captain Frank has to leave her and get back to the moon because, well, gosh darn it, he's got to. So Zatha gives him a rock to remember her by. Aww. He gets into his spacesuit and breathes good old American oxygen and gets restored to his former size. And then he gets rescued by a search party, and he holds on to Zatha's rock, which is now just a little pebble in his hand, to know that he didn't dream up the whole thing. But, as the movie tells us, this isn't really the end, but rather the beginning.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, Mike is quite certain no one can out Andy Rooney him. In the Andy Rooney impression preliminary rounds, we find Mike and the bots sporting the best crazy old man bushy eyebrows and expounding on the virtues and pitfalls of soup. This is followed by the horror of all three of them freestyling Andy Rooney in an overlap of continuous monologue. Pearl has ordered from a proto-Amazon type company a world domination kit delivered with some assembly required, and a crucial radioactive ingredient is sent separately. Somehow it ends up on the Satellite of Love, and now Crow is a triops. Tom is inspired by the movie to find out what is good and beautiful in the world just by looking around. And he takes this quite literally by finding a delicious thing to eat to represent the good and a picture of a pretty lady to represent the beautiful. And I don't know, is a nut goody good? I've never had one. Another movie break finds Mike outside the Satellite of Love, banging on the glass, which the bots totally don't hear, completely wrapped up in their own conversation. And as Mike slowly drifts off into space, Pearl and Brain Guy panic with fear as they find themselves surrounded by strange noises, a clanging of chains, and a sort of moaning. What is this, the second haunting of Jacob Marley? Nope, it's just Bobo, who has so many chains inadvertently attached to him the way other people might have a trailing piece of toilet paper attached to their shoe. Pearl and Brain Guy give each other the "let us never speak of this" look. While our movie steeps, Crow has collected a bunch of glasses of water and is learning to play music with them. Perhaps you saw this bit in Miss Congeniality. It's not as easy as it looks to master the music of the glasses. Not that easy, unless you're Mike Nelson, that is. Damn you, Mike, and your extraordinary yet humble musical talents. Crow and Tom give each other the "let us never speak of this" look. Having abandoned his musical training, Crow ends the movie viewing by suddenly having a rocking Solarite costume. It looks great, doesn't it? I mean, haven't you noticed how Crow is always so weirdly into the movie that when it's over, he has to embody something about it? Yeah, Mike and Tom didn't really notice that either, and Dejected and ashamed, Crow leaves to journal. Pearl's doomsday ray is all put together and sort of duct taped up, but she worries no one takes her evilness and desire to rule the world seriously. Some villagers are storming the castle, which is a good sign, or rather a sign of her evilness, until it turns out they just brought her a casserole to welcome her to the neighborhood. Pearl accidentally pours a pot of boiling oil on them. And then she does it a second time. Oops. What do you think, sirs?
You know, Charlotte, every year of my life, I grow more and more convinced that the wisest and best is to fix our attention on the good and the beautiful.
Seriously? Because it seems to me like every year of your life, you just seem to get a little bit more sick and a little bit more sad about it.
Yeah, that too. That too. Those are not mutually exclusive.
I suppose that's true. There's a lot of overlap between being older, sicker, and looking for wise and beautiful things.
So, yeah, for those people who have not seen this episode, the philosophizing first mate early on in the film turns to Captain Frank Chapman and just out of nowhere says that line.
You know, Captain, every year of my life, I grow more and more convinced that the wisest and best is to fix our attention on the good and on the beautiful.
Seriously, out of nowhere.
And I was immediately delighted by it, of course.
Of course you were.
And I wrote it down, and then, because, I'm taking my notes as I'm watching.
Sure.
And then Mike and the Bots started saying that line again and again and again. And I thought, oh no, it's a sci-fi era episode. They're going to run this line into the ground. And then they didn't. They said it just about enough times.
They totally did. And I thought that the segment that they made around that line was also really cute. I mean, it was nice to have kind of the philosophizing was supposed to be something general and big and beautiful about the meaning of life. And I like how Tom is very literally like, what is good? What is beautiful? I am looking at a good thing to eat and a beautiful thing to look at.
Yeah, I had not seen this episode before. I thought I had, but it turns out I haven't. And it was perfectly nice. I enjoyed this episode.
Ooh, so you had phantom memories of the Phantom Planet?
I guess so. I don't know anymore. I've forgotten everything.
There's so many movies with planets in them, and we've seen so many of them. Why not think you've seen this one too? I mean, it is definitely a strange-looking spaceship in black and white with lots of dials and visions of things in the background. So, it's not unlike what we might have seen in Radar Men from the Moon or
Rocket Ship XM or Crash of Moons or a bunch of other space films from this time period. This is also one of those episodes where we get to enjoy the 1950s thought of the 1980s rather than the 1980s thought of the 1950s that we're all much more accustomed to.
Oh my gosh. It was lovely to have one of the riffers say, oh, so this is our old future.
Yes.
It's a great riff.
I mean, they didn't have a lot about that. We didn't really get to see what the 80s are like.
We didn't even really get to see the moon, honestly. It's a surprise. They made such a big deal of being stationed on the moon, but we never really got to see a lunar landscape.
Yep. And we do get to have some women who are working up on the moon in the Space Force or whatever they call it, but no astronauts. No female astronauts.
No. Very unlike the Crash of the Moons, where there's at least Vera, but yes. Vina, who's, walking around in her little cape. And then the genius child, too. No genius children in this one, so you can't bring in your favorite memories of Wesley Crusher. And maybe that's why I just didn't find our main character that compelling.
Yeah. It was also interesting that Mike and the Bots made a lot of jokes about how Zatha was signing all the time, even though she doesn't do that at all.
It seems so weird to me that she would be inside of that community for years and years and not try to find some method to communicate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, maybe she did. This movie doesn't go into as much detail as it could, and it's not extremely realistic. Let's be real.
What?
And that's okay. That's fine. I will say, the film does come up with a few really big swings of concepts, such as the idea that breathing different oxygen from different planets will change the size of your body.
Yes.
That is so early sci-fi, a bizarre concept. It doesn't make any sense in any way, and I love it. Like, go with it. Sure, I'm totally happy with that.
Agreed.
I started paying attention to this movie again because the bit about the good and the beautiful had definitely gotten my attention. But then I got it again when it's like, yeah, no, oxygen makes change size. What? Okay, sure, movie. What else have you got for me? What else have we got for you? Gravity pads that if you step on them, you disintegrate instantly. And a culture where if you have a spat with somebody, you poke each other with a big stick until you get one of them to stand on it.
This is an advanced society. You can tell. You can tell because of the way that they resolve conflict and create completely ridiculous conflict at the same time. And the way that they become friends, right? Friendships are formed when you don't kill someone. It's amazing.
I mean, I've never killed you, and I like to think we're friends.
Oh, yeah. Is that why we became friends? Because you attempted to kill me when I decided I wanted to steal your spouse, and then we decided that we would be friends when we didn't kill each other?
Basically.
That totally tracks, yeah. Oh my gosh! We are this movie, Chris! Too bad we didn't meet in 1980. It could have been us.
This is the very first movie appearance of Richard Kiel, though you'd hardly know it.
Yeah, I mean, can you really call it an appearance of Richard Kiel?
I mean, he plays the best character.
By far, without question.
And even though he doesn't get any dialogue and he's hidden inside a costume, Richard Kiel playing the Solarite, the terrifying monster that has been captured, is nevertheless another one of the moments where I was like, you know what, movie? You're all right. Because, wow, the Solarite costume is good.
It's true. I'm so glad that Crow gets to have a full color blue and purple one after the movie is done. Because it is cute, like you described in the movie summary with the sad puppy dog eyes. And, ooh, he is so adorable.
It's real good. It's so good. We'll have a link if you don't know what we're talking about, but he is adorable. And, you know, Richard Kiel does a very good job of walking around very slowly in a way that is not threatening at all.
No. Well, I mean, it makes sense that it wouldn't be threatening. He's just a tall guy who's got a funny headpiece on or something. I mean, you know, like he doesn't have a weapon. He doesn't seem extraordinarily strong. He seems to be about the same as all of the people who live on Radon or our, you know, intrepid explorer. But yeah, he's not particularly threatening.
Yeah, except that he's so tall.
He's sure. Yes, I guess tall people are threatening. I mean, I do feel threatened by you when we're in person because you are quite a bit taller than I am, which of course makes you evil.
Yep, that's the part that makes me evil.
Well, I mean, it makes sense that Richard Kiel would be cast as an evil person, I guess, based on his height, if that's what evil is.
That is certainly what a lot of casting directors seem to think.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I watched that he was in that I was reminded of because of his appearance in this movie was his Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man, which is one of my favorite of the old Twilight Zone run.
Yes. So Richard Kiel, of course, was in both EGA and The Human Duplicators, in addition to this movie. We talked about EGA before, and I don't think we've done The Human Duplicators yet. So I guess we get to talk about Richard Kiel some more. But yes, this time you decided to watch not The Spy Who Loved Me or Moonraker, not Happy Gilmore, not even Tangled, but To Serve Man. I still haven't seen To Serve Man, but you know what? I feel like I know every beat of that episode from the number of times it's appeared in other media.
Oh, absolutely. It does feel like if you've never seen Star Wars, you know every beat of Star Wars. The same thing is true with To Serve Man. And, you know, Richard Kiel, tall in that one, huh? But not immediately recognized as being evil.
Right.
And yet, by the end of the episode, I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, he does turn out to be, well, is it evil to eat meat?
You're asking the person who's been vegetarian for quite a number of years now.
I guess I am.
I'm not really like that's not a question I'm interested in engaging with really, but
No, but it's one of those things where it's just like, I was just about to call him evil, but really, he's a space alien that has gone to a planet that has potentially, beings of inferior intellect that are well populated all the way across this world, and he offers them a nice way to live, right? He and his they're the Calumet. They give things to the earth that create world peace and sustained harvest so that everyone can eat their fill, and like, what a wonderful world now. And just because he wants to bring people back to his planet so that he can feed his own people, does that really make him evil? I mean, he's not a cannibal. He's not a human. He's just, he's found some nice cows and we just happen to be the cows. Is that so bad? I guess I just can't really call him evil.
Right. I guess some people would say, would you sign up to be Richard Kiel's cow?
There are worse ways to go.
There you go.
No, probably not. But honestly, like...
Well, you don't know anything about their slaughter methods, how they prepare the human. You haven't read To Serve Man.
No, thankfully not. I mean, I don't think I have the cryptography skills that the people who were working on that cookbook did. And it's important to note, it was a female cryptographer that decoded the cookbook inside of the episode. So, go women in STEM.
There you go. If only she'd been a little bit faster.
Yeah, well, she was fast enough. You got to imagine there's still a few billion people left on the planet. And
I mean, it's certainly true. If wars ceased because of this, she has probably saved more lives than she's cost, even if they took away a spaceship full of them. It's an interesting question. This feels like we once again hit the trolley problem.
Yes. But the question is, who's driving the trolley? Is it us or the Calumet? Because the alien could very much be the one who's in charge of the trolley, and not us at all.
I don't think it's who's driving the trolley that's the question. It's if you're given control of the trolley, what do you do? That's the question.
No, it's true. Because you got to imagine her running to the platform to tell him not to... I'm sorry, some of our listeners might not have actually seen To Serve Man, so maybe I should back up.
I mean, I haven't, but...
Yes, but you know the beats of it. The aliens come to the planet. They answer the questions of all the people who are super suspicious of them offering help. They accept the help. A beautiful era of world peace begins, and people start going to visit the planet that the Calumet are coming from, but nobody ever comes back. But it seems like this beautiful Eden based on the letters that people receive, and all the scientists want to go. And at the very end of the episode, as they've been furiously trying to decipher this book that the Calumet left behind, so far, they had only had the title, which was To Serve Man. But just as the scientist, who is our main character, is getting on the spaceship to go back to the planet, his partner in the decrypting yells at him, "Don't get on the spaceship. The book is a cookbook."
Yeah.
Da-da-da-dun. And so,
It's an awkwardly titled cookbook.
Well, I mean... Sure.
I mean, what if it was To Serve Pasta? That's a weird name for a cookbook about pasta cooking.
Sure. But if you're thinking about it from harvest to dinner plate, it is really all about going through the entire motion to serving someone else a meal.
So do you think Richard Kiel does a better job in To Serve Man than he does in The Phantom Planet?
So, yes, you can actually see his face, which was great, right? But he does have the kind of lumpy head that he also has as a Solarite. So he's got a lumpy head, he's really tall, he has flowing robes, but he doesn't get to speak because, of course, uber intelligent aliens who come to our planet to, eat us, they don't talk to each other with voices. They talk to each other through telepathy. Everyone knows that. Duh. And so they let everybody know, like, you're hearing my voice through a mechanical thing that I've created that you can hear my thoughts, but I don't communicate with other Calumates like this. I actually use, telepathy. So there it is. He doesn't speak, but he does get to give good face. And man, Richard Kiel gives good face into Serve Man.
So apparently Richard Kiel did record a voiceover for that part.
Ooh.
But he did a very bad job with it because he was exhausted from makeup and acting and all that stuff. And also, he recorded this episode, as I understand it, during the middle of filming Ega.
Oh my gosh.
They were able to work around his schedule, and he was able to take some time off Ega so that they could film some of the Arch Hall pool scenes, I guess, and show up for the Twilight Zone, record a bunch of scenes, and then they asked him to do some voiceover work, and he did it, and he didn't think he did a very good job, and neither did they, and so they got someone else in to do those voices, and Keel expressed some sadness about that, but, he agreed it was the right choice, so.
Sure. I mean, it's a shame he didn't get another shot at re-recording it, but the Twilight Zone was indeed on probably a pretty fast timeline for turning those around. It was like a weekly show?
It was, but again, my understanding is that they had filmed it and then didn't like how it came out, and so they re-recorded a bunch of scenes and made a new edit of it. So they took their time with this one because they wanted to get it right. Well, while you were watching some Richard Kiel, I decided to watch something that stars one of the other people in this film, Coleen Gray, who plays Liara, the one who can speak of the two gifted potential brides.
She's the one caught in two love triangles.
Yes, and doing very poorly in both of them.
Well, it's tough to be the daughter of the king.
Yep. Regular watchers of MST3K will remember Coleen Gray as the lead in The Leech Woman.
Oh.
Regular viewers of Bonanza will remember her from an appearance in Bonanza.
Oh.
But I wanted to watch something else that she was in because she had been in a bunch of movies, some of them fairly prominent, including Stanley Kubrick's first sort of mature film. He'd done a few films, but this is the first one that everybody considers like a real Stanley Kubrick film called The Killing.
I do not know The Killing.
It's an interesting little movie, and I'm going to try not to put too many spoilers out for it, though there might be some. So if you want to go into it knowing nothing, absolutely tap ahead to the next chapter mark, and I'll see you at the Shallow 13. But The Killing is a heist movie.
Oh, okay.
So The Killing came out in 1956, which is a few years before Phantom Planet. And Kubrick was like 27 when he made it. It's very early. But it's a very good movie. And while Kubrick is a bit of a style chameleon, so you couldn't watch it and say, oh yeah, this is definitely Kubrick, obviously. Nevertheless, there's a lot of very careful, formal composition, some interesting formal stuff going on to tell this heist story. It's about a guy named Johnny Clay.
Good name.
Yeah, he's played by Sterling Hayden. He just got out of jail, and he's realized that you basically get the same sentence if you do a $10 theft versus a $10 million theft. So you might as well go big.
Are you suggesting his first theft was $10?
That's what he says. He was in jail for a while for something incredibly petty, and he wasn't worth it. So now he's going to do something incredibly ambitious.
Okay.
And so he comes up with this incredible scheme to bring in a half dozen different people in different roles to take all the earnings from a horse track.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super interesting. Okay.
So there's all sorts of like people on the inside, people on the outside, et cetera, et cetera. There's this one guy. He doesn't have a huge role in this. He has a simple job, but he's a very nebbishy guy. And he's played by Elijah Cook Jr., who is a great That Guy actor. You might remember him as the nerdy screenwriter from the film Hell's a Poppin'.
Oh, well, I wouldn't because I only saw the dancing sequence.
Oh,
but
that's right.
Beth would. Hello,
Yes.
Beth.
That's right. I forgot you haven't sat down and watched the whole thing. You should. It's fun. He's also in a bunch of other Maltese Falcon and a bunch of other things. Anyway, he's just got this little tiny role, and he's also got a wife. And his wife is played by Marie Windsor, who you might remember from Swamp Diamonds as Josie,
Ooh.
the sort of spunky one.
Mm-hmm.
She's spunky here too. She is absolutely the villain of the film. She is two-timing him and just using him because he's promising her that he'll get money someday. And
Women, am I right? Gah. They ruin a good heist. Didn't we just watch this on another MST3K?
yeah, I mean, obviously not all women. Okay,
Sure, hashtag, but
Coleen Gray is perfectly lovely and stands by her man. But yes, in this case, absolutely, she gets him to spill the beans. She tells the beans to her paramour, and the paramour is going to try to get the money after they've collected it, but before they can distribute it, so that Marie Windsor and the paramour can walk away with all the money.
yeah, instead of having to share it, because sharing sucks.
Exactly. Coleen Gray gets second billing after Sterling Hayden in this film, and
Wow.
she's barely in it. She's got a little bit in the beginning and a bit more at the end, and she's fine. Honestly, in all the films I've seen her in, she's fine. I don't know. I want to say that she was some lost gem of an actor. She's fine.
But she must have been well known by the point in time that Stanley Kubrick was using her if she was going to get second billing for such a small part.
She had been in some other things before, absolutely, back in the 40s. As you might imagine, it seems like her career sort of went lower and lower, where she was in this relatively low-budget film by this not yet world-famous director, but she got second billing for it. And then she showed up a few years later in The Phantom Planet. And it's like, oh.
Oh, but her hair in Phantom Planet was amazing. Ugh.
Yeah, nope, her hair stayed true. It's a really interesting movie. There's lots of really clever stuff. It's told in this kind of non-linear way, where it's almost like a documentary. It's constantly, there's a narrator telling you at 4:30 so and so went into the building to pick up the gun, and like it gives you these details, but it doesn't show you all the pieces in order. It's a little bit confusing at first, and then you totally lock into what's going on. And then there's a really satisfying payoff at the end. And I certainly don't want to spoil what the ending is, because it's definitely worth seeing. But I think it's got a very strong ending, and there are lots of really interesting shots where the noirness of it all comes through. In addition to some of the actors being like Elisha Cook Jr., he's in a lot of noir films. He gives off that vibe. But there's a really great scene where two people are talking, and then just sort of naturally, while they're talking about their evil plans, they end up just standing next to a lamp, and the lamp lights up their faces like if you're holding a flashlight underneath it, so you get all these spooky shadows.
Uh-huh.
It is a very artsy shot, but it also comes off as incredibly naturalistic. I don't know. It's a really good moment.
That's amazing.
And there are lots of really good moments.
Yeah. I mean, that the light coming from below and lighting up somebody's face is generally what you think of when somebody's telling a spooky story or a scary story that's meant to be, like off-putting or something like that. So it's interesting that they would be using that for a couple of people talking about their nefarious plans.
Exactly. Also interesting. So Marie Windsor, you might remember Josie, had a bit of difficulty getting work as the blonde bombshell type, I suppose, because she was so ding-dang tall.
Ooh, that would be difficult. I mean, even Jane Lynch has difficulties with that.
Right. So she gets this role as the conniving partner to Elijah Cook, who is quite short.
Oh, so you get the Boris and Natasha effect.
Yes, except that it's Rocky and Natasha or something, because once again, the tall person is the evil one. And it's how she's dominating over him. And while this is an unfortunate trope, it nevertheless plays out pretty well in this film. And they don't highlight it, except that you just see it on the screen. Like it's constantly part of the composition in the scenes where she's domineering him.
Dude, how fun is that visually?
It turns out that Stanley Kubrick could think visually.
Huh. He might have chosen the right profession then. I always have a hard time thinking of Stanley Kubrick because I know he's been an incredibly difficult person for women to work with. And Shelley Duvall had a lot to say about working with him when they were doing The Shining, and how just absolutely horrific it was to be on that set. So I hope that Coleen Gray and the other ladies who were a part of this heist movie had a better time than that.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I mean, it's worth noting that although Shelley Duvall had a really difficult experience on set, and it was tremendously stressful, it was very difficult for her, she also said, later in her life, that she wouldn't have traded the experience for anything because, it was a fascinating experience, but she wouldn't want to do it again. But that Kubrick was warm and friendly to her, but it was really difficult. So it's complicated, right?
Yeah, it's just worth noting that not everyone had a great time on set with Stanley Kubrick. He could be a very difficult and demanding director, so.
Yeah, he was a perfectionist, and that can be rough. I don't know if I would have wanted to be in a film with him, but, he never asked, so oh well.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 chicken finger asteroids coming at you with fun facts about today's episode, The Phantom Planet. Go, Charlotte, go!
A few more familiar faces, though we're not going to mention every possible connection to other MST3K movies for reasons. Like, as we mentioned earlier, Richard Kiel was in The Human Duplicators, Rift in Season 4, and that movie also has Dolores Faith, who plays the romantic interest Zatha in The Phantom Planet. But we're not going to mention that.
See, and Charlotte also didn't mention that Lori Lyons, who has a small role here as a radio operator, also has a small role in The Human Duplicators. Of course, if you want to write in to tell us something cool about Lori Lyons, we'd love to hear about it, but you don't have to write in just to say that we didn't mention that she was also in The Human Duplicators, because, like we told you, we intentionally left that detail out.
Who are we kidding? We really do love to hear from you. So if you want to write in to complain that we didn't talk about how Tony Dexter, who plays Captain Frank's enemy turned friend Heron in this movie, was also in Fire Maidens from Outer Space, honestly, we'd still love to hear from you.
But, even better would be if you told us something interesting about Tony Dexter. Like how he looked so much like early movie heartthrob Rudolph Valentino that he was cast as Valentino in the 1951 biopic Valentino. Not the 1976 biopic Valentino with Rudolf Nureyev. Anyway, that would be a fun thing to tell us that we didn't mention.
Or like how the Rayton leader, Sesame, is played by Francis X. Bushman, who was in a zillion early Hollywood films. He was billed as, quote, the most handsome man in Hollywood. Take that, Valentino. And he had a major role in Ben-Hur. The 1929 Ben-Hur, not the 1959 Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston.
Now, Bushman didn't play Ben-Hur himself. He played the baddie, Masala. And the story that gets told is that Francis X. Bushman was one of the few actors who could handle driving a whole bunch of horses in a chariot race. He didn't need a stunt double or the special training that Charlton Heston needed.
Also write in if we didn't mention the weird trivia about director William Marshall. You know that the same year The Phantom Planet came out, the director also got married to none other than Ginger Rogers. Yes, that Ginger Rogers. It was Marshall's third and final marriage, and her fifth and final marriage. But they both lived for many decades after their divorce in 1969.
And if we don't mention that the narration was done by Marvin Miller, who did narration for a bunch of other Misted movies like King Dinosaur, The Day the Earth Froze, The Deadly Mantis, and Pipeline to the Clouds, hey, that's fine. You don't need to write.
But if we forget to mention that he also provided the dubbed voice of Ilya Muramet in The Sword and the Dragon, well, okay, then you should probably write in, because that seems like a biggie.
Or if you want to mention that he played the assistant to Paul Frees on the TV show The Millionaire. Have we mentioned that fun fact before? I don't think so. But given how we talked about Paul Frees a few episodes ago, it seems neat. In short, use your judgment. You got this one, listener.
And we get some more snacks mentioned in this episode that I guess Chris and I'll have to try one of these days. Like the bumpy asteroids make Tom quip.
There's a French burned peanut off the port bow.
A French burnt peanut is neither French nor burnt, but it is a peanut. Just like the Boston baked bean, which is not a bean, it's a peanut in a candy coating. But unlike the Boston baked bean, the French burnt peanut has a bumpy coating, which is usually very red. And we'll add some links if this isn't clear.
Another shot of several asteroids gets Crow to say,
Attack of the killer peanut brittle.
peanut brittle is a sheet of hard sugar candy filled with nuts. You let it cool, and then you whack it and break it into big shards. Oh, you knew that one, huh? Well, look, if we all pretend that we don't know, then we have an excuse to try out some peanut brittle on a future episode. And since peanut brittle is kind of the best, please don't ruin this for me.
Also, when Tom and Mike discuss contemplating the good and the beautiful, they consider a nut goodie. This confection is made by the same Minnesotans who gave us the salted nut roll. Anyway, this is a coin of maple cream covered in chocolate and peanuts. It looks fine. I don't know. Let us know if we should track this one down.
And that's time. Oh, also, there was a band that got inspired by this movie to call themselves Phantom Planet, and they are best known for a song called California, which became the theme song for the OC.
Oh.
And the band also had Jason Schwartzman in it as a drummer.
Oh. God, I could totally see Jason Schwartzman watching this movie or the MST3K episode and totally digging it. I bet they wear Solarite costumes on stage. That would be epic.
I don't think so.
Huh.
I think
Well, then
they
I'm
just...
disappointed all around. Jason Schwartzman, you are dead to me.
Okay. Well, Jason, if you're listening, I'm sorry you have to turn off the podcast now. Which is a shame because now we get to do the other familiar face from this episode and talk about your friend and mine, Andy Rooney.
Do you think Andy Rooney would be our friend?
I don't know. Andy Rooney is an untouchable god. He doesn't have friends.
Is he an untouchable god? He's malevolent if he is. I don't know.
I mean, malevolent also feels like it's a bit much, but...
Sure, yes, no. He's obviously just a little... He just seems so siloed.
Okay, so just in case anybody's not on the same page, Andy Rooney was a journalist who became very famous and very popular when he was given a slot at the end of 60 Minutes, the incredibly popular, what would you call it, a news magazine show that was on Sunday nights, I believe, or I think it was Sunday nights. I don't know. I was a bit young when it was on, and I thought it was super boring, but I did enjoy Andy Rooney's segments.
Yeah, because he seems like your crazy uncle, right? He seems like a crazy uncle type.
I mean, my crazy uncle was crazy in ways that were very different from Andy Rooney. And so thankfully he's not too reminiscent of that crazy uncle. But yeah, he's like cranky grandpa who's not giving up his Werthers.
Yes, he totally is. Or like Orville Redenbacher if he was more of a curmudgeon. I don't know. He clearly has like did a really good job branding himself in a time before brands were brands like we know it now, as like that homespun wisdom, curmudgeonly old man in a time when we were like way into that.
I mean, I don't know how intentional that branding is. And you make it sound like it was calculated, and I don't think it was. I think he was just given the chance to have the 3 minutes at the end of every episode of 60 Minutes and was given a chance to use it for, talk about whatever, something that's a relief from the mostly heavy topics that they covered.
Sure, but if you're doing that for decades, you are totally going to make a persona in the same way that like Garrison Keillor made a persona, right? Like it is that same kind of like old school spun wisdom that we're passing on. I don't get the young kids these days, and we used to do things differently. And let me tell you about how great it is the way we used to do things.
All right, but here's the thing. I was watching a little bio thing that CBS put together after he passed away in 2011. And it had a lot of pictures of him from early in his career. He was born in 1919. He lived a very long time. But even in his old old pictures, even in the army photos, even in like photos of him as a kid, he has the grumpiest face I've ever seen.
Does he have those eyebrows basically from birth? Because that's the most recognizable thing that Mike and the bots pull up when they're like, we're doing Andy Rooney impressions. And yeah, they do the cadence and the silly delivery, but it's those eyebrows, man. Those things are amazing.
He did a few other interesting things before he got pulled onto the CBS Crankathon slot, including writing for a few TV specials, one of which was from a documentary series called Of Black America. The episode was called Black History, Lost, Stolen, or Strayed.
Huh.
It was, unfortunately, it was hosted by Bill Cosby, who we don't think of as well now as we might have then.
Granted. It could be very difficult for us to think less of him.
Yeah, that made me not want to actually watch the episode, but he won his first Emmy for it.
Oh, how many Emmys did Andy Rooney get?
I don't know.
I mean, it's not like he had him on the shelf behind him.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He won 5, including a Lifetime Achievement one.
Well, good for Andy Rooney. And what an interesting thing for him to have covered or to have written for. Because one of the Andy Rooney 3 minutes that I watched was one about minorities. And essentially, from the perspective that we have now, the way that he was talking about minorities was just like, I just want us all to think about ourselves as human. It sounded like an All Lives Matter bulletin. You know what I mean?
I super do.
So it's interesting to think that Andy Rooney was a writer for something that was going to be framing Black history that Bill Cosby would be the host for.
He wrote the script for a TV special of Harry Belafonte and Lena Horne.
What?
Yeah. He talked about what a liberal he was, and in many ways he was, but he also said a bunch of stuff, both small and large, which in no way would I endorse or stand behind, and got in trouble many times for it. And in fact, got kicked off 60 Minutes several times because of things he had said that he had to walk back. Now, I will say in his defense, it seems like when he was told that he was wrong about something, that he often listened. And while he wasn't entirely buying it, he understood that like the world was more nuanced than he could understand, and then that lots of people arguing at him might have a point.
Yes, and he has 3 minutes. It's not a enormous think piece that's going to allow you to cover many facets of something. It's going to be something that is a quick 3-minute quippy, and if it's intended to be fun but substantial, that's a really difficult line to hold.
Absolutely. And it gives him that sense of authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's meant to be just sort of off the top of your heads, common sense kind of speech, but that hides a lot of lack of thinking and lack of contextualizing, which he did seem to recognize while also not doing a lot about structurally. So it's an interesting case, let's say.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the ones that I watched was about bottled water.
Yes.
It starts out just the way you think something from Andy Rooney or that curmudgeon perspective is. It's like, why don't we drink tap water anymore? Tap water's perfectly fine, and bottled water is so expensive. And of course, like, he does the math of like, if you were filling your gas tank and paying equivalent prices for gas as you are for this bottle of water, which you're spending $1.25 for this liter of, like, you'd be spending $150 to fill your 15-gallon tank or something. I think it was like 162. And it's like, holy criminies. Like, when you put the thought of how much you're spending for bottled water in that perspective, you what? That makes it seem like bottled water is like this super expensive luxury that all of us are indulging in, when our tap water is, of course, just fine. And so all of that seems very like, wow, this is pointing out a thing. We've made this change. It's created more waste. It's so much more expensive, and tap water is just fine. He even brings in this expert that's like, all these bottled waters have no minerals in it. They're basically dead water. You're getting better stuff from the tap. But then the end of his 3 minutes is about how he walked around the CBS studios and every woman inside of the floor had a little bottled water on her desk, like it was a whoopee or something like that, and how he was going to go try and sell bottled water with his face on it to the ladies in the office for 10 cents less than what you could get it in the machine. So basically, it became a piece about how women are dumb. It was just like, you just ruined it, Andy. You ruined it. You made it about gender when it was something that was actually really, really thoughtful and cross the lines of so many different silos that we live our lives in. Made me so mad.
Yeah, and it also shows sort of where the lines of his curiosity were, right? Because the idea that some people might not have access to quality water doesn't seem to have occurred to him.
Okay, also that.
And the idea that women might have bottled waters by their desk for reasons that are worth thinking about, maybe even asking them about. I don't know, you could do some reporting. But
Stop.
you don't just have to go to Mr. Science Guy.
No, you can't talk to women.
But there might be some interesting reasons why women are more likely than men to have bottled water by their desk, such as the idea that, I don't know, if you drink a lot of water, it's a weight loss thing, and that women are pressured to do these kinds of things, or that it's good. Like, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I'm going in with the assumption that I don't know because I try as a podcaster who talks about all sorts of random nonsense every time I come onto the show with you.
Sure.
And as somebody who I know has a voice that can be more authoritative than I mean it to be, I very much try to constantly remind myself and the listener that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm making a good faith effort to engage with things and think about things, and that I could be totally wrong. And I don't think Andy Rooney thought that way when he was writing.
Well, no, why would he? He lived his life as a white man in upper middle class America. In the 80s, I did appreciate him going through things like, I have a lot of kitchen gadgets. These are the ones I have. These are the ones I use. Why do I keep these ones that I don't use? Why do I have 4 can openers? Only one of them works. Stuff like that is like, oh my God, me. I do that. So there was a little bit of tapping into that for everything, but there are just some issues that might be too big to be quippy like that.
Yeah, and I think that kitchen tool one is really a spectacular one because it so captures what's so appealing about him, right? Where he loves these gadgets. He cannot stop himself from buying them and dreaming of them and thinking about how they might be useful in this one time and how wonderful these little things are. And he also thinks they are completely stupid, and he is stupid for buying so many of them. And he's willing to make fun of his own habits of getting them. And it's just like, yes, and he's cranky about them, but he's cranky about it in a way that still is undergirded with a love for details in life and everything that's going on around him. I think that when Andy Rooney's at his best, it is this loving curmudgeon character that I don't know. I mean, surprise, surprise. I find the loving curmudgeon character deeply appealing and resonant.
As do the writers at MST3K.
But I absolutely do not sign off on the rest of it, what he's saying.
Yeah, no. Chris, we've spent a lot of time talking about some of our favorite familiar faces inside of this episode. Is our final factoid going to be about a familiar face?
No. Yes?
Oh.
I don't think so. There's a moment when we get a shot of the ship, which has a very distinctive look. It's described as like a tube of lipstick at one point and like a marital aid, I think is the euphemism that they like to go with, although it seems very old-fashioned now. Anyway, at some point, Crow says,
"Spaceship, now with gentle glide applicator."
And I trust that you caught the reference to this one.
I did. It made me feel kind of silly because I made such a big deal about how when there was finally a lady doing the riffing, we got to talk about lady things. And this is definitely a lady thing reference.
It is indeed. Do you want to explain it to our listeners who may not be as familiar with lady things?
I guess. The gentle glide is what they generally call applicators for tampons so that you can get the tampon inside of your I don't know how technical, in your hooey, so, to catch all the blood before it gets out when you're menstruating.
Perfect. Love it. Yeah, it's specifically a Playtex invention. It's their trademark, and they came up with it in 73, it looks like. So that's what that is. It's a fun little thing, and yeah, they got to make a tampon joke even before they had a female host, so that's nice. But this did get me to thinking about something else.
Something else besides tampons and menstruation?
No, I wanted to think about menstruation in space.
Oh, because we got lady astronauts.
Because we've had lady astronauts for a long time now.
Yes.
And while they don't make an appearance in this movie, it's going to come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think menstruation is affected by being in space? Because it's not an obvious thing, right?
No, I mean, menstruation doesn't happen because of gravity. Menstruation happens because your body is, taking the lining of your uterus and expelling it out of your body so that it can rebuild for the implanting of another, your uterus hopes for a fertilized egg, but it's building for that. So it feels like your body would still have to menstruate.
Yes. And also the question is, does it sort of, you can think of weightless space. Does the blood float everywhere? And the answer is no, not really, especially if you're using a tampon or something like that. It doesn't. It all just works.
Yeah.
But they weren't entirely sure. And also the people at NASA, especially when NASA sent its first female astronaut into space, Sally Ride, in 83, they simply did not know about these sorts of things. And so we are told for a space journey of about 1 week, they said, don't worry, we're going to send you up there with 100 tampons.
Wow.
And she had to be like,
Who did that math?
That is definitely too many. You can cut that in half and be more than safe in the number I'm going to need.
I mean, unless you want me to leave it in the bathroom for the next lady astronaut,
I suppose so.
Have those things up there already. Maybe we don't want to break up the pack. I don't know.
Oh, but as we're about to send some people into space relatively soon, and those people include a woman on the mission that we're sending out maybe next year to go around the moon again in preparation for a mission to visit the moon before going to Mars maybe someday, just like in the movie.
Just like in the movie.
I thought it was interesting to think about this as well. But also I'm excited because we're going back to the moon. And they're planning on, for the moon landing one, to have the first woman land on the moon.
That's really exciting because, I can count the number of astronauts, period, who have been to the moon on one hand.
Your hand has a lot of extra fingers then, because I think it's 12.
There you go. Never mind. I can count it on just my hands and feet. I thought we'd sent a lot of people on Apollo missions, but we hadn't had that many actually land on the moon.
We have had 12 men walk on the moon. 2 of them are still alive as of recording, I believe.
Boy, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that sounds a lot like what we might be watching next.
Well, hold on there, Charlotte, because first we got to say that if you, listener, have been affected by the issues on this show, if you've been fixing your attention on the good and the beautiful, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and you know what? We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. For as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like Jessica, and you can help us research and record this show, and you can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/159.
Well, Chris, it is a special time of year for us here at It's Just a Show. It is time to celebrate some of our favorite people. Or our favorite person.
That's right. It's Labor Day, although I think our next episode will be coming out a little bit after Labor Day. But nonetheless, we're going to celebrate the original Dodeca Laborer. We've run out of Hercules movies. We've run out of not quite Hercules movies. But we haven't run out of movies that have the number 12 in their title, and we have been on a bit of a planetary streak. So next time we're going to be doing a season 5, episode 24, 12 to the Moon.
Ooh, I don't recognize this title. I don't know if I've ever seen this. Is this one that you fondly remember from season 5?
It's one that I never watched a lot. I'll tell you that much. And I don't know if I ever would have made you watch it, but I'm curious to rewatch it and learn more about it. But until then...
Well, I better deploy my rugged, handsome independence now.
And that's why I'm dressed as Quentin Crisp. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Oh,